Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Wednesday, May the 1st, 2024. Happy May! And thinking about dogs. So I've got a dog. Perhaps you've heard my dog. Sometimes the dog barks while I'm recording this video. And you could say, well, that's annoying. And so if your dog is being annoying and the dog is not behaving, then surely you should show leadership. And if your dog is uncontrollable, does bark in your videos, then surely what you need to do is show your leadership by shooting your dog. I mean, that's what you expect of me, wouldn't you? I mean, you listen to my dog and you think, well, I can't control my dog. So when, if I said, well, you can't hear my dog anymore because I've gone and shot my dog, I think you'd probably appreciate me more as an astrologer. Isn't that right? Well, perhaps that's the logic of Kristi Noem, because Kristi Noem is the governor of South Dakota, and she has got a book coming out which is called, a very long title, No Going Back, the truth on what's wrong with politics and how we move America forward. And in this book, Kristi Noem talks about a dog she had, which was a wire-haired pointer called Cricket. And this wire-haired pointer was, she couldn't control it, and it was 14 months old, and she used it for hunting. I think she was hunting pheasants, and it attacked someone's chickens. And she admitted that she hated that dog. And also, I realized I had to put her down. So she took this dog to a gravel pit, and she shot her dog. And she also shot a goat. And she talks about shooting the goat, and I think she used a shotgun, and the first shot didn't kill the goat, and she had to use a second shot and go back into her truck or her car to get some more ammunition to finish the goat off. And she's admitting all this in this book, and she would say or argue that this was showing leadership, that she was the kind of person that can make hard decisions, and so that's a reason to vote for her. Now, this is important because she's a potential candidate to be a potential pick for Donald Trump when he's choosing his vice presidential candidates. And with the imminent publication of a book, and people have already talked about what's going on in talked widely now about this admission that she killed not just her dog Cricket, but a goat. I think the goat was chasing her children or something like that. And so I would have thought that is probably the end of her, well, not necessarily the end of her political career. I don't know what happens in South Dakota. I think South Dakota has in terms of American states, has some of the lowest standards in terms of animal rights legislation in the United States. But I think it's very unlikely that Donald Trump is going to pick Kristi Noem as his vice presidential pick. I did actually talk about Kristi Noem's chart, I think in September. So I am going to talk about it again. I don't want to say too much about her, but if I remember rightly, in September I did say that if Donald Trump picks her as his vice presidential running mate, that's pretty much the end of his run as president. He wouldn't have any chance of being elected president if he chose Kristi Noem. I mean, it's not complicated why I said that Kristi Noem was a problem pick, and I'll be looking at her chart to show you why I didn't think that she was going to be a good vice presidential candidate and how that she might harm Donald Trump's chances of getting to the White House. And I think this confirms it, and I think it's now almost impossible now for her to be Trump's pick unless Trump wants to commit political suicide, like Kristi Noem has done now, committed political suicide. So that's the first chart I wanted to look at. I also am reminded that today is the 30th anniversary of the San Marino Grand Prix. I don't think the San Marino Grand Prix actually takes place in San Marino. I think it takes place in Imola. Is that right? I'm not remotely interested in motor racing, Grand Prix, that kind of thing. But the reason the San Marino Grand Prix in 1994 is so memorable, or not infamous, is that two drivers were killed. One on the 29th of April, and the one on the 30th of April, one on the 1st of May. So there was an Austrian driver, Roland Ratzenberger, who was killed on April the 30th. That's right, on April the 30th, 1994. Then following him is the Brazilian driver, Ayrton Senna, was killed on May the 1st, 1994. So today is the 30th anniversary of Ayrton Senna's death. So I wanted to look at the astrology of the San Marino Grand Prix. I've never been, no, I have been to San Marino, although I don't think the Grand Prix actually takes place in San Marino. Yeah, I went there with my parents in 1984, and the only thing I remember about San Marino, the main thing I remember about San Marino is what we did, and that's we went to an exhibition of instruments of torture. It was quite a big exhibition. They really put a lot of effort into it. I can't remember a great deal about it, but I don't know if you're into that kind of thing. I don't know. I don't think it's a standing exhibition. I shouldn't think it's there anymore. But anyway, I have been to San Marino. It's a very, very small country, which is completely surrounded by Italy. But okay, that's what I'm going to discuss today, not the instruments of torture, the 1994 San Marino Grand Prix. And of course, I'm also going to look quickly at the chart of Kristi Noem. But first, I'm going to look at the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Wednesday, May the 1st, 2024. And looking at the thumbnail, there is, you can see, there's Kristi Noem. That is a German wirehead pointer. I assume that's the same as a wirehead pointer. I don't really know a great deal about different breeds of dog, but I think that's a similar breed or the same breed as the one that Kristi Noem used to own and the one she shot. And there on the right, that is Ayrton Senna picking up some trophy. So I don't think that today is a particularly active one. I think we can see that the moon is in Aquarius. It's going to be in Aquarius all day long. So it doesn't matter what your time zone is. Moon is most certainly in Aquarius. And at the same time, Venus is square Pluto. That's the other big thing. So Moon in Aquarius, we can say the usual things about Moon in Aquarius. Moon in Aquarius, it's an air sign, and it's quite fixed. It is fixed. Aquarius is a fixed sign. So when you've got Moon in Aquarius, there often isn't much room for compromise. Moon in Aquarius has its own way of doing things. It can be very independent-minded, and it often doesn't like to be told what to do. But it is an air sign. So there is always a certain amount of flexibility with Moon in Aquarius. Moon in Aquarius is at least prepared to listen to other people's ideas, even if it's going to be very inflexible about them. Aquarius is kind of the approach of saying, well, having listened to all views, I know that I'm right. So that can be how Moon in Aquarius works. And this Moon in Aquarius is square the Sun, and it is sextile Mercury. So the Moon square Sun does help emphasize the stubbornness of Moon in Aquarius. Doesn't like to change. Does like to do things its own way. And when it's square the Sun in Taurus, there can be a situation where perhaps two parties refuse to move. This is a square, though. It's not an opposition. I mean, opposition is by definition a full moon. But there may be a certain sense of conflict. The moon represents sort of the female principle. The sun represents the male principle. They are in conflict. It's a first quarter moon, and so it's a moon where there's a little bit of dynamism here. But I don't want to say that it's too bad, because from a perspective of a lunar cycle, the first quarter is when the new lunar cycle is really getting underway. It's still got plenty of room to move. We're halfway between the new moon and the full moon, and it's a time where maybe things are getting better, or at least that's how it feels. The moon is also making a sextile to Mercury. I think we should all feel this moon sextile Mercury. I think it's going to be more of a feature, though, if you are in the Americas. I think you'll still pick up on it in Europe. But this moon sextile Mercury, it's good for communication. We are going to be able to express ourselves quite effectively, I think. Moon is sextile Mercury in Aries. And Mercury is now going direct, and it's conjunct the North Node, and it is certainly the right thing to do to tell people what's on our mind, and we shouldn't be too careful in terms of what we say. We can't always guarantee that we won't offend people, but it's moon sextile Mercury. Sextiles represent a certain amount of ease, but not complacency. We know that it's not 100% easy to get our message across, but if we make the effort, it should be okay. A different aspect going on today is Venus square Pluto. Venus is the planet of relationships, can be about money, and it's square Pluto. So in terms of relationships, things might be a bit intense at times. And if you are really expecting just everyone to get on, there to be sort of emotional harmony, then I think, again, I'm not sure that's necessarily going to be the case. And in relationships, there could be a bit of a power struggle, and one party might be using emotions to manipulate the other. Though I don't want to exaggerate it. This Venus square Pluto is in fixed signs. It's not in water sign. It's not a water sign. It's not like Venus is in Scorpio. Venus is in Taurus. It's more about, I suppose, two people having different feelings about a situation, perhaps responding to a situation in different ways. And it's quite clear that there is a struggle there. And who is going to have the emotional power? But again, Venus is not in Scorpio, so one doesn't want to exaggerate the influence of this square between Venus and Pluto. As far as midpoints are concerned, there is Mercury, and it is on the Venus-Mars midpoint. So Mercury on the Venus-Mars midpoint, it goes back to this concept of communications and how we communicate. And with Mercury conjunct the Venus-Mars midpoint, I think it is a time when many of us can be actually very charismatic. We can express ourselves in a way that is attractive, which is another reason for not holding back. With this moon sextile Mercury, we really can express ourselves in a very convincing way. Though, if we are not expressing ourselves, then someone else is going to be doing it. And so there are going to perhaps be certain people who are smooth talkers. They're very clear what they want, but they can deliver their message in a very clever way that sounds very convincing. But just because someone sounds convincing doesn't necessarily mean that you should follow their lead. From a heliocentric perspective, there's not a great deal going on, or at least there's not a great deal going on that I haven't already talked about. But I feel I should just quickly go look at the chart just to show you what is happening. Okay, there it is. And yesterday I referred to the fact that there was a trine between Earth and Saturn. Well, that trine between Earth and Saturn is even closer today than it was yesterday. And I would have said that Earth trine Saturn is pretty constructive. That's Earth. Remember, this is from a heliocentric perspective, putting the sun in the center of the solar system where it should be. When you've got Earth trine Saturn, it means that it's a time when you can structure the world, when we can be disciplined, when we can make ourselves very clear without having to exaggerate. And yeah, structure is going to be important. Okay, with that trine to Saturn, there may be times today when we can't always get what we want. We have to accept reality. That's always the case with Saturn. You've got to face reality. If you don't face reality, then you can't progress, because you're going to get caught up in fantasy. But that's really not going to happen, I don't think, because the Earth is trine Saturn. And also we have got this Mercury-Venus trine, and it's now separating. Mercury is in fact making the trine to Venus. That trine is exact today, and so Mercury, having made the trine to Chiron, makes this trine to Venus. And as I've already said, Mercury trine Venus, I believe, is a fortunate influence. It makes it easy for us to get our message across, and so there's a lot of stuff going on today, not just heliocentric but geocentrically. I've talked about moon sextile Mercury. Geocentrically can help with communication. We've got Mercury geocentrically on the Venus-Mars midpoint, and heliocentrically we've got Mercury trine Venus. So if we've got anything to say, if we've got any skills that we haven't been showing the world, then yeah, now is the time to get it all out into the open. Don't be shy, because I think people really want to hear what you've got to say. And that's it with the heliocentric position of the planets. From what I can see, it's not particularly dramatic. I mean, if we want to just look ahead, you see there's Earth at 11 Scorpio. Notice that when the Earth gets to late Scorpio, then we are going to have we're going to have Earth opposition Jupiter and Uranus, but that'll be in a few weeks' time. And of course, when you've got Earth opposition Jupiter and Uranus, that's the same thing geocentrically as the Sun conjunct Jupiter and Uranus. And so that's something to look forward to in a few weeks' time. Turning to the 12 signs, let me first switch to the geocentric picture. And now I will do my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Wednesday, May the 1st, 2024. Aries. Aries, you're feeling that you've certainly got a lot to say. I mean, a lot of people have got a lot to say, and that includes you. The moon is in Aquarius, which is a very sociable place for the moon to be, at least from an Aries point of view. And that moon is starting to make a sextile to Mercury. Now, that moon sextile Mercury is going to be more important, more prominent if you are in the Americas than, say, if you're in Australia or New Zealand. But even if you're in Australia or New Zealand, I think you're still going to pick up on the fact that the moon and Mercury are in sympathetic signs. Moon in Aquarius has a sextile relationship to Mercury in Aries, regardless of the angular difference between the moon and Mercury. So I think all Arians, wherever you are, should find it relatively easy to express yourself. But I think especially the case if you're in the Americas. So do consider what you have to say. And, you are an Aries. Your role on this planet is not to make everyone just feel comfortable. Your job often is to stir things up and to initiate things. And I think today, Aries, there are things that it is worth initiating. Though in the process, Aries, you may, rub people up the wrong way. It's possible. You can't be friends with everyone. There are some people who are not going to like what you have to say. But if someone doesn't like what you have to say, really, is that a problem? You cannot be friends with everyone. If you are going to freely communicate, then it is inevitable that some people are not going to like your message. Maybe in certain extreme situations you might fall out with them. But that may be the price of honesty. And in fact, it might be the price of being an Aries. That certainly is possible. So why might you fall out with people? Well, there are a number of reasons. It could be about money, actually. You might have an idea about money, or they might have an idea about money, and your idea about money and how to spend money and how not to spend money may be at odds with each other, and that could cause a disagreement. So perhaps in terms of money, maybe you should steer clear of that subject. It depends, but maybe you shouldn't. If money is an area that you feel you need to discuss, then go ahead and discuss it. Though it is possible that someone talks about money in a way that for you doesn't feel right. If you're a typical Aries, you don't regard money as the be-all and end-all. Sure, you might regard money as being important, but you don't regard money as a prime motivator. And it is possible that today you come across someone, or maybe an organization or a group of people, who seem to be really concerned about money in a way that just is strange, is not helpful, just annoys you, and perhaps you see someone for what they're really like as far as you're concerned. You perhaps see someone's selfishness and their meanness in terms of money, and that does inform your decision about how to treat them in the future. Now, I can't ignore the fact that Venus is making a square to Pluto. Now, the importance of Venus making a square to Pluto from an Aries perspective is that Venus is the ruler of Libra, which is your opposite sign. And so if Venus is square Pluto, that might mean that someone is being overly secretive or is holding something back and is not being clear and honest with you, because Venus represents the other person. Perhaps they're playing emotional power games, and these are not games you want to play, and these are games that you should not be playing, because right now, Aries, if you think about it, what you really need and what you really require is people who are completely straightforward and honest. And yeah, you certainly don't want people playing games. And so if people insist on overcomplicated things, if people insist on overcomplicating things, maybe you should just stay out of their way. Taurus. At the moment, Taurus, you do seem to be quite ambitious. There are things that you definitely want, and as far as you're concerned, there are ways you can get them. The sooner the better. It all started yesterday as the moon started moving into Aquarius, but now the moon is very much in Aquarius, and it's making a square to the sun, and I do think that makes you ambitious, and you're thinking about what you want, and you're not going to let go of your ambitions. You know, you might be told that your ambitions are unrealistic, or that they're causing too much damage. But really, is that your problem? Because this is a time when you should be thinking about what you want. It's okay. Jupiter's moving through Taurus. Jupiter is not going to stay in Taurus forever. That's a kind of a warning, because with Jupiter in Taurus, you know, this gives you a lot of opportunity, and it makes you luckier than average. And sooner rather than later, Jupiter will leave Taurus. I should probably tell you exactly when Jupiter is going to leave Taurus. Jupiter leaves Taurus. It's soon. Really soon, actually. It's 25th, 26th of May. So you've only got a few weeks left of Jupiter being in your sign. You've got only a few weeks left to take advantage of Jupiter being in your sign. And you know, if you miss this, then you're going to have to wait another 12 years for Jupiter to go back into Taurus. And today, with the Sun square Pluto, this really does focus on your ambitions and what you want. And maybe there's a little bit of a hurry. You haven't got forever, because Jupiter will soon enough leave your sign, and there's that particular opportunity to get what you want easily. And another aspect is Venus is making a square to Pluto. So Venus has just gone into Taurus. It's a great time, Taurus. You've got Venus, which is the lesser benefic, and Jupiter, the greater benefic, are now in your sign. And you will have these two planets in your sign for another few weeks. But by the end of May, Jupiter leaves, and Venus will leave too. So Venus will 23rd of May, Venus leaves Taurus. 25th of May, Jupiter leaves Taurus. So yeah, take advantage. And This Venus is square Pluto, and today Venus is square Pluto. And I actually think that this Venus square Pluto could be quite a useful aspect, because Pluto in Aquarius is a sign which is very ambitious from a Taurian perspective. It's a high-profile sign. It's about you trying to create dramatic changes and being able to exploit those changes to make the most of the many opportunities that can make themselves available. So Venus square Pluto, it's just more focus. And so Taurus, really try to focus on what you want and be stubborn. Once you know what you want, don't allow yourself to be knocked off the path. It can happen, but it would be unnecessary. And really, Taurus, just take advantage of just everything that's on offer. And if something's important to you, don't think that it's impossible, and don't delay. Delay at this stage could be, well, really bad. I mean, okay, delay for a day or two, but if you delayed for a few weeks, you've got something you really want, and you say, well, wait until the end of May, it may be too late. So do consider that. Anything else, Taurus? Well, I think it's important to be, yes, independent-minded, as I've already suggested. Another thing is that from a heliocentric point of view, Venus, your ruler, is trine Mercury. Remember, from a heliocentric point of view, not from a geocentric point of view. Normally with astrology, people look at the charts from a geocentric point of view, but heliocentrically, Venus is trine Mercury. And Mercury is the planet of communication. Venus is you as the communicator, you telling the world what you want. People need to know, because if there's a bit of a hurry and there are things you want to happen, you can't expect other people to be mind readers. You have to be very clear about what you want. But with Venus trine Mercury, you can tell people what you want in a way that doesn't cause offence. I understand that Taurians can be a little bit blunt and unsubtle. There's no need to be blunt and unsubtle with Venus trine Mercury. You can very clearly tell people about what you want without causing offence, without sounding greedy, without being unnatural. Gemini. Well, when I was talking to Taurus, in fact, when I was talking to everyone, looking at the heliocentric positions of the planets, I mentioned the fact that Mercury was trine Venus from a heliocentric view. And Mercury is your ruler. And so with Mercury trine Venus, then that really does indicate that you can be heard. And if you're a Gemini, it's really important to be heard. And I think people will be interested in what you've got to say. You're going to sound forward-thinking, clever, intelligent, and you may be the one with the ideas. So do take advantage of that. And I think you're helped by the fact that from a geocentric point of view, the moon is moving towards a sextile with Mercury. Now that sextile between the moon and Mercury, okay, it's going to be more of a feature if you're in the Americas, but I think all Geminis, wherever you are, can benefit from that sextile between the moon and Mercury. And the moon sextile Mercury allows you to communicate and to express some of your ideas. And you've got some really interesting ideas, which are really forward-thinking. Geminis often are forward-thinking. They sometimes doubt themselves. Geminis can have this inner dialogue. You think, well, is this such a good idea? Maybe it's not such a good idea. Maybe someone's thought about it before. What is the point? Geminis can have this internal dialogue that can just bring them to a grinding halt. But no, I don't think you want to overthink it. It's got to be brought out into the open. And don't underestimate your charisma, because Mercury, which is obviously your ruler, is conjunct the Venus-Mars midpoint. So Venus-Mars as a pair are very charismatic. They are the planets of male and female sexuality. They're very much connected with attraction, knowing how to attract people with the power of your words. And so trust yourself to say the right thing. And yeah, you don't have to overthink it. Just express yourself in a natural way. And Geminis, as they say, what do they say? They have the gift of the gab. They're able to talk about just about anything, and they can be very convincing. And yes, Gemini, today you can be convincing, and I think you need to put yourself in a position where you are noticed. So if you spend all day on your own, refusing to talk to other people, then you can't really expect much to happen, can you? But as soon as you're in a position where you are engaging, then you can really create some big movements around you. People will listen, and they will listen to you, and I think they will believe you, and that is important. Of course, some Geminis are complete liars. Not all Geminis. I don't think I'm a liar, but some Geminis are liars. And so if you are a lying Gemini, sure, it's possible that people will believe whatever you say, but that doesn't mean to say that you should come up with a load of lies today. That's not what it's about. The whole point is to be genuine and to be sincere, and I think people will respect your genuine sincerity, and they will listen to you, and in many cases they'll be prepared to follow your lead. Cancer. The moon is, of course, your ruler, and the moon is very solidly in the sign Aquarius. Doesn't matter where you are, moon is in Aquarius. Now, with the moon in Aquarius, you are perhaps feeling that you're not on best form, that the world is just a little bit complicated, that maybe if you make an effort to be seen and heard, well, that effort just won't be appreciated. At least I think that is your initial approach as you go into the day. It's all problematic, and people don't understand, and it's best to keep things to yourself. But I don't think that is the right approach. I think that you would be misusing or underusing your abilities. As we say with Cancerians, Cancer is a sensitive sign, picks up on a lot of stuff, and very often it knows how to use the stuff it picks up. So the feelings you have about the world and where it's going, they're not just theoretical, they're not just talking points. These feelings are there to be harnessed. And I think today, Cancer, you really are in a position where you can really start to harness your feelings in a real sense. For example, in terms of your work or your business, the way you're engaging with the outside world, you are picking up on things. And because you are picking up on things, you're able to use these feelings in order to be successful. And to be more precise, there are many people who are super sensitive, and the information comes flooding in, thoughts, feelings, inspirations, picking up on other people's feelings, and it's all completely chaotic. But for you, Cancer, you really benefit from the moon being in Aquarius. Remember, the moon is your ruler. It's in Aquarius, which is an air sign. So what this means is that you can actually start to make sense of what's coming in. It's not just emotional garbage. You can, and a lot of it perhaps comes from your unconscious. That can often be a problem, but you can make sense of it. You can rationalize it. And so Cancer, when the information comes in, you can process it and work out what is meaningful and objective and true, and what is just nonsense, just the chattering of the unconscious mind. And that Cancer is going to be able to really help you make good decisions. And this is especially the case in terms of your work, business, having to deal with the outside world. You will know what you can do, what you can't do, and you'll know what people are thinking and what people are feeling. And in fact, your emotional sensitivity plus your ability to process your emotions is going to make you more effective when dealing with other people in a high-profile situation. Leo. The moon is in Aquarius. Now, Aquarius is the opposite sign to Leo. So when the moon moves through Aquarius, it's very often a time when Leos do have to put a certain amount of energy into dealing with other people, outside pressures. It just can't really be helped. Now, that doesn't mean to say that you have to be overwhelmed by it all. In fact, in many respects, you can benefit from it, provided you're able to listen. It's not just about having a big concept of what you can do and being very proud of this concept. Yeah, you might think you've got it all sorted out, but I don't think you have. I think there is still more work to be done. And the moon, while it's moving through Aquarius, it makes a square aspect to the sun. And of course, the sun is your ruler. And with the moon making a square aspect to the sun, that might be about someone making a criticism or perhaps representing a different viewpoint. And it could be a criticism or a viewpoint that in the first instance you don't like. You're just not you're not interested, and it may even seem threatening. Remember that Leos can be quite into themselves. They can have an arrogant streak, and so when someone suggests that maybe you're wrong, you don't take kindly to it, and this might cause a bit of bad feeling. So what would I suggest? I would suggest, Leo, that you do listen to what people are saying, and you don't be too thin-skinned. If you find yourself getting some criticism, it might be implied criticism, someone not directly saying you're wrong, but maybe suggesting that perhaps you might be wrong, but in a subtle way. Yeah, don't be upset about it. You're just being given an opportunity to just consider the world in a new way. And perhaps, Leo, it might be a situation where you need to make a few changes to your plans. They don't have to be huge changes, but a few changes could be very useful. And in certain cases, maybe something more substantial is required, or you might feel that something more substantial is required. I think that at the moment, Leos regard it as being very important that they have freedom, and if something is holding you back, you're not just going to sit there. You're going to want to do whatever is necessary. And in certain cases, some Leos may be able to assert dramatic force and really create a sort of a mini earthquake. Yeah, you can do it. It's easier than it sounds if something's really important to you. But you do have to make sure that it is appropriate. You don't cause an earthquake, don't turn the world upside down just on a whim. But if you think that something is really blocking you, is holding you back, or something needs to be said, that people need to dramatically change the way they're doing things, yeah, you can really assert yourself. You could. But that doesn't necessarily mean to say that you have to. Virgo. Virgo, when I do your forecast for the day, I do look a great deal at Mercury. Mercury is very important because Mercury is your ruler. And there is a lot going on with Mercury, both on a geocentric and a heliocentric view. So when I looked at the position of the planets from a heliocentric perspective, I pointed out that Mercury is making a trine aspect to Venus. Remember, that's not a geocentric aspect. From a geocentric perspective, Mercury and Venus can never be in trine, but from a heliocentric perspective, they can be in trine. And that Mercury-Venus trine, heliocentric trine, does, I think, make you fairly charismatic, and you can get your way and get people to listen to you without being obnoxious. By being obnoxious, I mean just getting obsessed about small details, being critical for the sake of it. You don't have to do that. You can be positive and open about how you see the world and what you want, and I think that people will listen to you with that Mercury-Venus trine. And it's also a great opportunity to be demonstrating talents that are suddenly becoming popular. Because, the world we're in, it's all about trends. What's fashionable today might not be fashionable tomorrow. What's in vogue, what's out of vogue. And today, you've got some abilities which are very much in vogue. People really want to know about them, want to hear about them. And so by telling people about what you can do and your special abilities, people will say, yeah, that's really what we need. And matters are helped by the fact that Mercury, which is of course your ruler, is conjunct the Venus-Mars midpoint. And with Mercury conjunct the Venus-Mars midpoint, you are going to be very appealing, attractive. You will stand out. It doesn't have to be anything you say, it's just the way you are. And so do take advantage of that. So, if there's something you want, something you need, just your mere presence can be enough. But of course, if you can say something, if you can just communicate what you want, but you don't have to be pushy, you don't have to make a big fuss about it, just by simply stating what you'd like, then I'm fairly confident that you can get your way, and you can get your way without there having to be any arguments or fights about it. It'll just seem natural. As I said, particularly right now, you are someone who is very much in vogue. You are flavour of the day almost. So do take advantage of that. And just remember, you don't have to be spectacular about it. You don't have to make a big effort to get attention. In fact, if you were to make a lot of effort to get attention, and if you were to behave in an exaggerated way and really feel you had to shout a lot, then all the advantages I've been talking about would dissipate. Just keep it natural. Just be yourself. Do what you feel is comfortable with, what you're comfortable with, and everything else should flow from that. Libra, you do have a certain sense of your own power today. You believe that you're capable of making things happen. Now, you might still have a few doubts. I mean, I suppose when I say belief is a problem. It's a problematic thing because it suggests a certain amount of faith. And I suppose if you have belief and faith, then I suppose your beliefs can be knocked if something doesn't immediately go your way, or perhaps you have worries about, whether you're behaving really in the right way. Is this really the right thing to do? But fundamentally, Libra, as I've said, you do have power, and your actions will carry great weight. And I think it may be perhaps because they're out of character. People get used to you behaving in a particular way. They say, well, that's how Libra behaves. So we're getting used to how Libra behaves in a particular way. And that's fine. But when you break out of that, when you start behaving in a different way that appears slightly out of character, then you get people's attention. And I think that today you may have an opportunity to behave in a way that is slightly out of character, using a little bit of force in situations where in the past you would not have used force, probably because you regard something as being really important. And so when you see that moment to really assert yourself, then go for it, because I think you will get fast results. And it should be noted that Venus, which is of course your ruler, is square Pluto. So with Venus square Pluto, yes, you do have a sense of your own power. And this power is really deep. Venus is in Taurus. It's in a very stubborn and very determined position. Venus is you, and actually, if you think about it, there are things you really want, and there are things you really don't want, and your sense of desire is going to be strong. And with Venus square Pluto, almost through your willpower, you can make things happen. And one thinks of sort of Aleister Crowley. He was a Libra, wasn't he? Didn't Aleister Crowley say, "Do as thou wilt shalt be the whole of the law"? What that means is you have to discover your true will. And I think today, if any days with Venus square Pluto, maybe Libra, you can really discover what your true will actually is. And once you've decided what your true will is, that's it. That is the law. That's the way it should be, and you can't compromise it. Well, unless, of course, your true will is something immoral, criminal, or crazy. But under normal circumstances, your true will is going to be about you, and it's going to be about your destiny. And I think, Libra, you can get your way, and I think you're going to be helped by the fact that there is a heliocentric trine between Mercury and Venus. So Mercury trine Venus, with that heliocentric trine, Venus represents you, but Mercury represents the way you come across, and trine is harmonious, and with that Mercury trine Venus, you can tell people what you want very firmly, but in such a way that you won't cause offence. People will think, oh, you're serious, but not crazy. This is what you want. And I think that ability to communicate, not just to other people, but also to the universe. It's just telling the universe, this is what I want. This is the way I'd like things to be. And I think that the universe will listen to you. And of course, I think other people are going to listen to you as well. Scorpio. You may feel that in some respects things are a little slower than usual. I know that Mars has just moved into Aries, and I talked about that yesterday. And yeah, it's great that Mars is moving into Aries. I think it's going to put Scorpios in a very strong position, and I think that you're going to be able to really organize your world in such a way that you can make things happen and you can assert yourself and that you can be strong. But we are talking about today, and we're talking about something very short term, and I just kind of feel that things might not quite go as expected or as you'd like them to go. You might in particular find that certain people are dragging their feet. They're just not being helpful. They're not giving you the cooperation you feel you deserve. And because people are dragging their feet, it might be best that you really take the view that only you can do it. But if you want something done, it's down to you and your hard work. And it might seem a bit grim to begin with, but there's also a certain freedom there. Because if you're doing things on your own, if you're not relying on other people, then you can make your own choices. Of course, it does mean that if things go wrong, then the only person to blame is you yourself. But that's kind of liberating as well, because you do get a sense of control, and it's a day when you should not be making things complicated. You certainly shouldn't be putting up with anything too chaotic, and perhaps the best way of handling the day's challenges is not to try and do too much. Yeah, it's easy to try to do a lot. And if there are lots of pressures, I've already suggested that other people may not be particularly helpful. But if other people are not just being unhelpful, but are also making demands upon you, then that could be a real problem, because you're just having to go all over the place. You're having to deal with many different pressures, and in the end you will just achieve nothing. And so that is the day at its worst, but it needn't be like that at all. Just concentrate on yourself and what you can do. Keep your targets simple, and don't get involved in other people's power games. I mean, that could be a problem, because Venus is making a square to Pluto. Venus rules Taurus. It's your opposite sign. Venus can represent some of the people around you, the people you're close to. And it seems that one or two people are going to want to be in control. They may be trying very hard to assert themselves, but it's up to you. You don't have to fall in with other people's power games. You can watch them. You can be amused by them, but you don't have to give in to them. And I think the more autonomous you can be today, then the better things are going to be for you. Sagittarius, you have clear ideas, and I don't think that you're afraid of expressing these ideas. In fact, you can express your ideas with considerable passion. You can really demonstrate that you believe in what you say. And the fact that you believe in what you say is emphasized by the fact that you can get angry when you get contradicted, or when you see something you don't like. You are capable of expressing anger. But I mean anger in quite a verbal sense. Your words will certainly carry a great deal of weight. And you have to ask yourself, how necessary is it to be verbally aggressive? Now, you can be verbally aggressive if you need to be, but I think in most cases you don't have to be. And, this is especially the case if you're in the Americas, because you've got the moon is making a sextile to Mercury, and in the Americas this moon sextile Mercury is getting stronger as the day progresses. I think you'll feel it to a lesser extent in other parts of the world, but I think it's particularly strong in the Americas. And yeah, you'll be able to use words very effectively, and I think in most cases you won't have to push the point. And I think people will say, well, this is important to Sagittarius, so we'll accept Sagittarius's view of the world, but Sagittarius seems to know what it's doing. Though it does seem that today there may be someone you have to get in touch with, or perhaps you need to send a message, tell someone something important. I mean, not super important, not a matter of life and death, but there does seem to be a message that has to be delivered. And it is possible that this message might have to be delivered in person, ideally. I don't say have to, because that's too strong. But it's more perhaps what is advisable, what is best, that perhaps a message has to be delivered in person, or I would ideally be delivered in person. And in order to deliver that message, it may be necessary to, perhaps go on a short journey, just a few miles. Maybe you don't even have to go by car or public transport. Maybe you can just go by foot, deliver the message. Just that personal touch will, I think, make a big difference. Capricorn, you are actually very focused on your own power. You can feel it. You can feel that you're someone who should be taken seriously, and I think that in many respects you expect to be taken seriously, and I think you can get away with it, and it's all about your focus. Yes, Capricorn, it's really important to have that focus, and I think that once you really concentrate on something that is important, then things are really going to move. And I think that you will be helped by the fact that there is a square aspect between Venus and Pluto, and this Venus-Pluto aspect is about you being able to just focus on one thing. You don't focus on two things, three things. You have to decide today what is the most important thing today. Choose one thing and then give it absolutely everything you've got. And if you give it everything you've got, I don't know, nothing can stop you, almost, within reason. Now, not everyone will appreciate this approach. Your approach is somewhat harsh, perhaps a little bit humorless, but Capricorn, you know that you need to get your priorities right, and once you've got your priorities right, then things will really start to move for you. And I suppose it's not really a day for apologizing or explaining, because if you apologize or explain, you will just be weakening your overall position. And you need to also realize that there are certain places in which you are stronger than other places. It's all about location. There are some places that where you just know you're weak. And if you go to these places, or maybe it's not just places, it's people, when you're with these people, you know you're weak. There are other places where you are totally invulnerable, almost. And so today you need to make those choices. Just hang out in places where you know you're strong. And it's not that you're being a coward or you're being unimaginative. It's really that you are using your resources in the best possible way. And I think in many cases, if you are in a strong position, if you are almost invulnerable, then that's going to help other people as well. In particular, your family and those other people who are really close to you. So make yourself strong, be very determined about your own interests, and I think that a lot of other people will benefit at the same time. Aquarius, you are now looking really good now, because the moon's in your sign. Doesn't matter what your time zone is, moon is definitely in Aquarius. Absolutely no doubt about it at all. And with the moon in Aquarius, it is a fixed sign. You have a very clear sense of yourself, and you have a clear sense about what you want to do. And I think it's going to be pretty easy for you to explain yourself. You can explain how you see the world, what you want, what you don't want, and I think in most cases, people are going to listen to you, because you'll be able to talk with great authority. People aren't going to just question you. So if you say something, that you say, oh, this is the case, I don't think people are going to say, are you sure? Are you sure of your facts? People will just make an assumption that you've got it right. Now, that does give you a certain amount of responsibility. If you're going to say that something is 100% right, knowing that everyone's going to believe you, or that most people are going to believe you, then you do have to make absolutely sure that you are right. So, Aquarius, I would recommend that you check your facts. I think that is important. I mean, I'm sure your facts are all completely in order, or at least 95% of them. But there just may be the odd fact that you are just a little bit too sure about. And you have a responsibility to the world around you, to the people you're dealing with, to make sure that you really have got it right. But don't worry. You absolutely seem to know what to do. And, I'm confident that it's going to be a very powerful day. And though don't Don't be too headstrong when dealing with members of your family. You know, I suppose we can't ignore the fact that the moon is square the sun, and that moon square sun, moon in Aquarius, square the sun in Taurus, can be about at least one member of your family, or perhaps someone very close to you, you might have a slight disagreement with. You know that you can get your way if you really want to get your way, but you do have to ask yourself, is it really worth it? And I should also say that there might be some sort of small domestic responsibility that needs to be sorted out as soon as possible, because if you don't sort it out, it could create problems later. It's probably something really boring, something you really don't want to engage with, but I think it's a day when it might be best to just get it out of the way, because once you've got it out of the way, you're going to feel a lot freer. Pisces, you are somewhat deceptive, and I mean deceptive, I think, in a good way. Deceptive in the sense that people may think that you're one thing and you're actually someone else or something else. So they might, for example, think that you're just nowhere to be seen, or hiding in the shadows, that you're not really present, and as a result they might underestimate you. And if you're in any form of conflict situation, I think you will be underestimated. And I think if people are underestimating you, I think that very much works in your favor, because if people are underestimating you, their guard is down, they don't expect you to do anything, and then suddenly you roar into life. And indeed, today, Pisces, you can really express yourself very, very well, and you can express yourself with power, and that's what matters, real power. But it's not like you're doing it all the time. You can be completely silent almost. It's almost as if you're not there. And then all of a sudden you are there, and you are making a really big impression, and you catch people unawares. And so that's how it can be. But I think for most of the day, really, there's just not much pressure on you. You can observe, you can watch what people are doing, and probably there's not going to be any cause to really stick your neck out, because it's unnecessary. But you're ready to do it. And yes, people are underestimating you, and all the while you are watching what is going on. And it's important, though, not to underestimate other people. And other people may be underestimating you. I think they are. But there's also a possibility that you're underestimating them. And you're underestimating them by not actually understanding or not appreciating how useful they could be if you gave them a chance. And I think that is important, to give other people a chance. Even if you do not want to have anything to do with the world, there is at least one person who is quite happy to talk to you, who wants to be in touch, who's got something to offer. Yeah, if you give them a chance. What have they got to offer? Okay, they might have advice to offer you. There might actually be a financial dimension there. So a financial opportunity may come from another person. And this is not a complicated issue. It's not something requiring deep thought, accountants, financial risk. It's just an opportunity. It may not be a huge deal, but if you just talk to someone, then there may be a very easy way to make money. So, I don't know, if you're running your own business, there may be some new business that's just waiting there. Again, it may not be a huge piece of business, but it's just waiting there to be picked up. But you do have to communicate. And so don't shut yourself off today, and make sure, Pisces, that you're always available, at least available for a 2-minute conversation, because opportunities can only come about through interaction. If there's no interaction, there are no opportunities. And that's it for the 12 signs. And I now want to consider the day from the perspective of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Wednesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching segment of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram 63, after completion. So after completion gives us the sense that something is finished. We're done. We've got to the other side of a river. And perhaps we can now relax. But there is a sense with after completion that we're reaching or past the peak of something, that now things are starting to go into decline. I mean, that's always the case, isn't it? When we think something is done, we've got there, but now we have to deal with the transition. And that transition, there can be a feeling of decline as we make that transition. That transition is not as good as we thought it would be, and we have to be really careful because we have to get the balance right. And the Wilhelm translation of the I Ching, it points out that this hexagram after completion, the top 3 lines represent water and the bottom 3 lines represent fire. And the I Ching indicates that, the Wilhelm translation, that water and fire are fundamentally incompatible with each other. Either, if you've got a kettle boiling, and I think this is the image that Wilhelm uses, if you've got a boiling kettle, it's possible that the fire can overwhelm the water. In other words, the kettle just boils dry. Or the kettle overflows and puts out the fire. So we have got to get the balance absolutely right after completion, because this is a new situation, and things could so easily go into decline. That's so often the case when we have achieved something, and so we have to just get used to this new situation and not blow it. And with this hexagram, the top line moves, and one way of looking at the top line is to say, well, one should not look back. I suppose you think of, is it in the Bible, Lot's wife with Sodom and Gomorrah? Is that right? Sodom and Gomorrah. Lot's wife turned back, and she got transformed into a pillar of salt. So we must not look back. We must keep going. Once we've made the transition, we do have to keep going. Mustn't look back. And we also have to be aware that the situation is a little bit dangerous. It's like moving through deep water. That's another way of looking at it. And we've crossed the river, but there's still something we're in where it is where we haven't made it quite yet. And so, again, great caution is required. and we must just look ahead, not think about the past, and then we can transition to the second hexagram, because the top line is moving, and that takes us to hexagram number 37, which is a much calmer hexagram. That is to do with the family, with the group, the clan, the people we're familiar with, not just friends in general, but the group we're in. And so I think the idea is that once we've made this transition, and I think it's a very difficult transition, we are feeling vulnerable, and in fact we are vulnerable, but not everything has transitioned. And one thing that is constant, however many transitions we make in our life, the constant should be our family, or it should be the clan, that group of people that are always there for us. And I think that's what we need to do as we make the transition. We mustn't feel that everything is in a process of change. It's just the constants in our life, in particular our family and the family structure, can see us through and provide us with the security we need to move from the past into the future. And having done the I Ching, I want to look at Kristi Noem. And Kristi Noem was a potential candidate, vice presidential candidate for Donald Trump. And we have just had all this stuff about her shooting her dog and her goat. And I think most commentators take the view that that is pretty much the end of her political career, at least on a national level. Maybe it doesn't matter in South Dakota. I don't know anything about South Dakota, because South Dakota is, of course, the state where she is governor. And turning to Kristi Noem's chart, so she is a Sagittarius, Sun in Sagittarius, Jupiter in Sagittarius, Mercury in Sagittarius, Neptune in Sagittarius. She's got loads of stuff in Sagittarius. So it's perhaps sometimes said that Sagittarians should perhaps keep their mouths shut sometimes. And so it seems to be a very Sagittarian thing to do, to write this book and to admit to shooting a dog and to shooting a goat. And it's very honest of her, perhaps. Of course, there's a question about why she admitted it. I think there is a view that people knew about this story with her and the dog. They've known about it in South Dakota for years. And so she knew that if she became Trump's vice presidential pick, people will be talking about it. I think the same happened with Mitt Romney in 2012. He got into trouble because when he was younger, he'd gone on a cross-country road trip and he'd had his dog in a kennel, and he had the kennel strapped to the top of his car. So Mitt Romney got into a bit of trouble there. But, I mean, he might have been putting the dog at risk by putting it in a box on top of his car, but Mitt Romney never shot his dog. I mean, that's beyond the pale. And I think that's going to destroy her any chance she has of being Trump's pick, unless Trump wants to commit political suicide. I mean, I know that Trump doesn't have a dog. Probably, as far as Trump's concerned, he couldn't care less whether she shot her dog. I'm not making any political point about Trump. Trump is just not into dogs. He's not into wildlife. He's not into nature. I mean, that's Trump. That's not necessarily any reason not to vote for him. But yeah, I don't think that Trump, on a personal level, will be particularly bothered by Kristi Noem shooting her dog. But from a political perspective, I think he might well be bothered, because he doesn't want to have a vice presidential candidate who's going to lose in votes. So still, Kristi Noem is being honest, and I suppose we should welcome that. That's typical Sagittarian behaviour. And when I looked at Kristi Noem's chart, I think it was in September, I did a video about her. And when I looked at her chart, I basically said that she should not be someone that Trump picks, because he'd be doomed if he picked her. And it's easy astrology, because she's got all this stuff in mutable signs. There's her Mars in Pisces, square Jupiter, Sun in Sagittarius, all this stuff. Saturn is going to be rolling over this year. So as you move into the presidential election, I mean, you look at November the 5th, Saturn is at 13 Pisces on November the 5th at the time of the presidential election. She's got her Mars at 14 Pisces. Saturn will be moving to a square of her Saturn will be moving to a square of her Jupiter. I mean, it's just not good. And I think simply on the basis of the Saturn transits, it wasn't looking good for her. And I'm just wondering a little bit about the psychology of this woman. And I think that with Kristi Noem, she has this association with death. There's something deathly about Kristi Noem. And I think we can see this by looking at her Mars-Saturn midpoint. See, there's her Mars, there's her Saturn. So her Mars-Saturn midpoint is at approximately 22 Aries. It's about there. 22 Aries is her Mars-Saturn midpoint. So her Sun is sesquiquadrate her Sun-Saturn midpoint. So Sun on the Mars-Saturn midpoint is someone who can have an association with death. And let me just show you the 90-degree dial to show you what I mean. So this is a 90-degree dial. Remember, a 90-degree dial shows conjunctions, oppositions, and squares as conjunctions, and it shows semi-squares and sesquiquadrates as oppositions. One day I will put up a video going into the details of this. So let's put her Sun on the pointer. So there's her Sun on the pointer, and you can see there's Mars, there's Saturn. So there's symmetry there between Mars on one hand and Saturn on the other. In fact, she's got a Saturn-Neptune hard aspect, and Mars is picking up on that. We don't know her time of birth, by the way. I must emphasize that. So there's Sun on her Mars-Saturn midpoint. There's Kronos on her Mars-Saturn midpoint. Now, Kronos is a hypothetical planet which is associated with government, with power and authority. And let me just show you the hypothetical planet. Let's put Kronos up so you can see what I mean. So there is where's her Kronos gone? There's Kronos. You see in her natal chart, she's got Kronos opposition the Sun, and her Kronos and her Sun are aspecting a Mars-Saturn midpoint. So Kronos Sun would potentially be about her as an authority figure, and her trying to be an authority figure and trying to model herself over an authority figure. And then one thinks of her father, Ron Arnold. I'm not going to go into his chart in detail. Looking at this chart, this is a horror. I mean, I just cannot look at this chart almost. It's a horrible chart. At least it's a horrible chart in the sense that this is someone I would not get on with. And her father was just a South Dakota farmer. All the farming values. This is how you look after the land. This is how you behave and whatever. And so, very important person in her life, her father. And a person who I think in many ways has dominated her life and has dominated her political career. And he has dominated her life and his political career in many respects from beyond the grave. And with Ron Arnold, her father, let me just get rid of the hypothetical planets. don't want to crowd out the chart too much. So there's her father, super Virgo, born in 1944, Sun, Jupiter, Venus, Mars in Virgo, and moon in Scorpio. Well, we don't know exactly where his moon is, but because I don't have his time of birth. But the thing about her father, Ron Arnold, is that he died in an accident in a grain elevator. I think that you could imagine, I don't know quite how it works, with a big elevator full of grain, and he fell in and I think drowned in grain. Is that how it works? And here is the chart for her father's death. Her father died on March 10th, 1994. And at the time of her father's death, there was a Mars-Saturn conjunction. So that's very much about her. This death of her father, I think she was in her early 20s when he died, and it just completely messed her up. And she's wanted to be like her father. And with this death and shooting her dog, I think it all kind of says the same. It's the same thing. Now, she excuses her shooting the dog and the goat as being about, tough decisions. We have to do this. This is what being governor and perhaps being a president or a vice president is all about, being able to make tough decisions. And she just got this from her father. This is her dead father taking over from her. I think that's perhaps one way of seeing it. This is what her father would do. Yeah, her father would shoot the dog. But I don't know. Maybe I'm overcomplicating it. She said about that dog, I think in the book, she said, "I hated that dog." So that's the kind of person she is, isn't it? I hated that dog, so I just shot it. It was inconvenient. Sun, I suppose Sun aspecting Mars-Saturn. Maybe father's death repressed a whole load of feelings. Maybe that's the way what she's like anyway. But that does seem to be, I don't know, Sagittarius gone wrong. It's because it was inconvenient. Sagittarius does things its way, and she does things her way. That's true. She had that firework display. She wanted to have a firework display, was it right, in Mount Rushmore Park? And she wanted to shoot fireworks up, and then I think she was stopped because it was a fire risk, but she was really upset about that. And I think there's something quite childish about it, that really, it's amazing that she's governor of South Dakota, but that's the childishness of Sagittarius, and just, thinking, if you've got a problem, you shoot fireworks, you shoot your dog, you shoot your goat, and that's Kristi Noem. Now, her father, remember, died on March 10th, 1994. Now, someone else died in 1994. And in April, it was, May the 1st, 1994. That was when Ayrton Senna died. And the day before, Roland Ratzenberger died. And so I thought I would look at the chart of the death of Ayrton Senna. So here is Ayrton Senna. I mean, I know that he's been dead for a long time, but I think that if you're into motor racing, which you're probably not, but if you are into Formula One and all that kind of thing, then Ayrton Senna is considered as someone fairly iconic. I do remember when he died, and people were going on and on about it on the radio. I didn't have a television, but I had a radio, and people were just going on and on about Ayrton Senna. It was a huge deal when he died. So this is the horoscope of Ayrton Senna, and he was born on March 21st. So I suppose you could say Sun, first degree of Aries. If you've got the Sun on the first degree of Aries, then you want action. You want to be a racing car driver. That's just typical Aries, isn't it? That makes perfect sense. And he has the usual the usual career path of a racing driver, getting as a child, getting into go-karts, and his parents were quite wealthy. They could support his hobby and pushed him and fly him around. And I suppose, of course, he must have had a certain natural talent. I mean, I'm not unappreciative of the talent needed to be a Formula One racing car driver, to be going around at 200 plus miles an hour a circuit and being able to casually ask the control tower about the weather, and to be able to function at that level at 200 something miles an hour. Yeah, I mean, I've never driven faster than 98 miles an hour. 98 miles an hour is actually the fastest I've ever driven, and that was for about 5 minutes on the Autobahn between Cologne and Nuremberg, and that was a long time ago, and I couldn't even get to 100. It was just terrifying. But so yeah, I do fully appreciate the ability of a racing car driver, and I think he has got Moon Saturn conjunction in Aquarius, in Capricorn, and maybe that is part of it. To be a successful racing car driver, it's not just all about fire, Sun in Aries, whatever. You need to have a certain solidity there and a certain groundedness there, because you've got to function at very fast speeds and be able to keep your cool. And maybe that is having, Moon conjunct Saturn in Capricorn, and maybe even Jupiter in Capricorn. So we don't know exactly where his moon. Yeah, we do, because we do have a time of birth. Yeah, his moon was conjunct his Saturn, and he had Neptune on the midheaven. So Neptune on the midheaven, I suppose, is the glamour of being a racing car driver. All the champagne and going to Monaco and Monte Carlo and all that kind of thing. Some people might be into that glamour, but I suppose if you're a racing car driver, you are constantly having to move forward, round and round and round. And if Neptune is in Scorpio on the midheaven, in the end, you might make a miscalculation. That certainly is possible. And another problem with this chart, well, what you would expect with a racing car driver, is his Mars. He's got Mars in the first house. So Mars, he's quite an assertive man. And where did he use his assertion? Well, on while he was racing, and that Mars was opposition his Uranus in the 7th. So having a Mars-Uranus opposition is the classic signature of a car accident. Remember, Hunter Biden has Mars opposition Uranus, and of course it was that car accident in December 1972 where he lost his mother and his sister, and he himself and his brother was seriously hurt. And so there is the Mars-Uranus opposition in Ayrton Senna's chart. Then we had the the San Marino Grand Prix, which I think took place in Imola. And if we turn to his death, his official time of death is 2:17 p.m. I think it depends what you mean by death. I think he was brain dead at 2:17 p.m. I mean, his body may have been functioning to some extent after 2:17 p.m., but this is when he had his accident. And before looking at the chart for his death, I wanted to look at the lunation before. This was the full moon for April the 25th, 1954, set for Imola. And this lunation has it's a Scorpio full moon. There's that moon in Scorpio, opposition the Sun. So we've just had a Scorpio full moon. So Scorpio full moons can be really difficult, can't they? They do presage bad things. And at the time of that full moon, set for Imla, Pluto was close to the ascendant, and Saturn was on the descendant. And yes, we had the moon in Scorpio. Let me just set that up from an astrocartography perspective, see if we can see anything. So I will set it up for okay, let's set up the astrocartography there. So there are all the places which have Saturn on the Saturn opposition. The actual crossing point of Pluto and Saturn was sort of here in the middle of the Mediterranean, but we can see that Saturn was on the IC. I don't know. I think Imola is, it's about here, isn't it? So it's pretty close to Imola, and yes, the moon was certainly in Scorpio, and I'm not saying that we could have used that full moon on its own to predict when the accident would happen, and he wasn't the only person who. Senna was not the only person who was killed. Before looking at Senna's chart, I want to briefly look at the chart of Roland Ratzenberger. So Roland Ratzenberger was an Austrian Formula One racing car driver who died on August the 30th, and so. He died in hospital I think he was flown to Bologna, and so just have a look at his death. So the position of Ratzenberger's death, I mustn't get him mixed up with the former Pope. What was he? I can't remember. Not Ratzinger, Ratzenberger. So, we don't know. I don't have a time of birth for Ratzenberger, but Ratzenberger had the moon at approximately 11 Scorpio, 6 degrees either side, but he sort of had moon opposition Mars in his chart. Now, at the time of Ratzenberger's death, there was an opposition between Mercury and Jupiter. So there was a Mercury-Jupiter opposition at the time of his death, and the Sun was also opposition Jupiter. So there was an exact Sun-Jupiter opposition, there was a Mercury-Jupiter opposition, and all of this was hitting his Mars. And so I would have said that was really quite appropriate. I mean, I don't know, appropriate is quite the right word, but so his Mars was really being hit by the Sun-Jupiter opposition and the Mercury-Jupiter opposition. And let's just go back to the horoscope of his death. So this is I think when he died in hospital. And so when he died in hospital in Bologna, you can see that Chiron was exactly on the ascendant, and I'll be coming back to that. Then turning to Ayrton Senna. So Ayrton Senna so there's Ayrton Senna, and Ayrton Senna so I'm going to just look at the Ayrton Senna's death to see what transits Ayrton Senna actually had. There it is. So with Ayrton Senna, because we have a time of birth, we know what his midheaven was, and Ayrton Senna had a midheaven of 8:15 Scorpio, and therefore he had Neptune at 8:43 Scorpio. So the Sun-Jupiter opposition, which coincided with the death of Roland Ratzenberger, was on Ayrton Senna's midheaven. So Jupiter was, the Sun-Jupiter opposition was right on Ayrton Senna's midheaven, and also on his Neptune conjunct the midheaven. Now, in astrology, I have observed that when Jupiter crosses the midheaven, it very often means a time when you either get a job or lose a job. When I was doing contract work for a cell phone company in the UK, I had this job for 12 years. It was a good job. They paid quite well. It was good to have work, constant work as an astrologer. That's amazing, having that kind of... It was great having a job for 12 years. But I got that job when Jupiter crossed my midheaven. And I lost the job when Jupiter crossed my midheaven. And so you could say that Ayrton Senna, his career as a racing car driver, ended when Jupiter crossed his midheaven. Of course, it didn't just end. He ended as well, but it was still the end of his career as a racing car driver. And there's Jupiter on the midheaven. And Jupiter was hitting his Neptune conjunct the midheaven. And finally, I want to look at Ayrton Senna's solar arc directions. So solar has... so this is Ayrton Senna's solar arc directions. I think that's right. So for May the 1st, 1994. No, I think that's the wrong one. This is the one. Right. This is Ayrton Senna's solar arc directions. So let's compare them with his chart. So on the inner wheel, we've got Ayrton Senna's chart. On the outer wheel, we've got his solar arc directions. Remember, he was born in 1960, he died in 1994, so he was 34 when he died. So you move each planet 1 degree for a year. And solar arc directed Saturn was at 20 degrees 51 Aquarius. So in his natal chart, he's got Saturn at 17 Capricorn and Mars at 20 Aquarius. So that means that when he was born, Mars and Saturn were about 33, 34 degrees apart. So this is a case where by eye, you could have said that he was going to be at risk of dying when he was about 33, particularly if you knew he was a racing car driver. You wouldn't have had to have used tables, calculations, computer programs. You could have just looked at his chart. There's Saturn, 17 Capricorn. There's Mars, 21 Aquarius. 21 plus 13, that's about 34 degrees apart. He's going to be at risk when he's 34. And sure enough, solar arc directed Saturn, 2051 Aquarius, right on his Mars, and that's when he died. And that is, I would have said, easy astrology. Also, his solar arc directed Mars was at 2416 Pisces. So his solar arc directed Mars was exactly on his south node. And that's when he died. So the south node, I suppose, he's doing what comes easily to him. That's what south node is. And Mars hits it. So he dies doing what comes easily to him. And then he has to now sort of move on to new challenges. So that's the San Marino Grand Prix, and it is the 30th anniversary of Ayrton Senna's death, and I wish Ayrton Senna well wherever he might be. So thank you very much for listening. I hope you found this video interesting. And if you did find it interesting, I would be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed and you like this video, I would be really, really grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So thanks again for listening, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.